Hello, today we're going to learn all about how shutter speed affects your macro photography, and we're going to get started right now. Hello, my name is Constantine and welcome to my channel on macro photography. First of all, I want to say thank you to a lot of the new subscribers that I've had over recent times. Thank you especially to Stuart Wood, who helped boost a lot of my membership many months ago. And I really greatly appreciate all of those who have stuck with me despite not putting out a lot of videos in the last little while. It's been crazy for me professionally and personally, given the world situation, but I hope to be a little bit more consistent in getting videos out this year. So Happy New Year! We made it, we passed 2020. Now let's get started on some great stuff. First of all, we just want to review a little bit that I'm covering off what is called the exposure triangle. How you modify settings on your camera that affects the exposure of your images. When it comes to shutter speed, a lot of people think that you need a really fast shutter speed to stop motion. In particular, maybe stopping the wings on an insect as it's in flight, or any kind of movement in your macro subject. Well, that's not entirely accurate. There's a little bit more to it than that. And this is the part that I want to cover, the part that many people forget. Remember that exposure, when it comes to images of any style of photography you do, is all about the light. How the light hits your subject, where that light is coming from, and what the results are. Macro photography is no different. Stopping the wings on a bee or a dragonfly as it's flying through is usually actually not a function of shutter speed, though it can play a role. And we'll get into that in a little bit later in a future video with exactly how that works. But when it comes to the amount of light that hits your subject, you can control that through shutter speed. Simply put, if you have a very bright object, in this case this is just a Lego stormtrooper, but say it could be a flower or something like that, it's kind of the wrong time of year to have flowers, and that's the other thing I struggled with, is how to present this video given the time of year. But anyway, if you have a really bright subject, and there's a lot of light on your subject, you're going to get a lot of reflection, particularly if it's at noon on a really bright day and there's not a lot of shadow or cloud cover or anything of that nature. And if you use some of your normal shutter speed, say 1/200th of a second, you're going to get an image that is overexposed. It's too bright. Now, yes, you can fix a little bit of this in software later, such as Lightroom or Photoshop. But as much as possible, I try and get things correct in camera so that I have to do very little to no adjustments in Photoshop and Lightroom. So you can use shutter speed to control the amount of light. Now, obviously, the slower your shutter, the more light is going to hit your subject. This is particularly true of continuous light, such as daylight. If you have some sort of continuous light in a studio setup with lamps, which we will show you in a minute, it's much easier. If you use strobes or speed lights or anything of that nature, the shutter speed actually doesn't matter as much. It only matters for ambient light, the amount of light, available light that's in the room. So the brighter the subject and the more light on it, the easier it is to overexpose at shutter speeds that you would actually normally use. But if you make that shutter speed a little bit faster, the less light has time to be exposed on your camera sensor. So let me show you exactly how that works. We're going to get into it right over here. Okay, so here we've just relocated to my kitchen I've got my macro lighting frame set up. I've got my camera set up here, connected to the lighting frame, and I've got my subject here on a tripod or on a little table there, and it's all pre-focused. Additionally, I've got a couple light panels shining as much light on them as I can, and I'm going to use a nice little very, very bright flashlight to try and mimic as much as possible really bright lighting conditions when you're outside taking macro photos. I'm going to try and keep the light at a constant distance from the subject to make sure that everything is as equal as possible. All right? So, got my camera here. And I'm going to take the flashlight and I'm going to bring it really close to the subject. And all I'm going to do is take a picture. And as you can see, even at 1/200th of a second, that is really, really bright. So I'm going to increase my shutter speed just a little bit to 1/250th. Take another shot, and even with that, you can see just how much light that minor adjustment changes. And we're just going to keep going. And keep going. And let's see, what are we at there? 1/800th of a second. We'll just, I believe it was right about there. We'll go one more to 1/1000th of a second. And you can see exactly what kind of difference that makes just by adjusting your shutter speed. Remember that when it comes to macro photography or any kind of photography, the amount of light that hits your subject is really the key. If you try and use a fast shutter speed to stop a moving insect and it's not bright enough, you're going to get an image that is underexposed, which is not what you want. You want to try and get the correct exposure in camera as much as possible. Yes, once again, you can adjust in Lightroom or Photoshop, and that's great. But you want to get to the point where you can take a look at your conditions that you're shooting and know you're going to need a faster or slower shutter speed just from the available light. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Next time, we're going to cover aperture and depth of field for a very in-depth discussion. So stay tuned. Remember, make the little things a big deal. See you next time.